Daniel Kahneman's groundbreaking work has revolutionized our understanding of human thought and behavior. His pioneering research on cognitive biases and heuristics has exposed the hidden forces that shape our decisions, revealing a complex and often irrational mind. Get ready to enter the fascinating world of a man who has rewritten the rules of psychology and forever changed the way we think about thinking. As we delve deeper into the life and work of Daniel Kahneman, it's essential to explore his formative years, which laid the foundation for his groundbreaking contributions to psychology. Born in 1934 in Tel Aviv, Mandatory Palestine, Kahneman's early life was marked by significant challenges. His family moved to Paris when he was a young boy, and during World War II, they had to flee to the south of France to escape the Nazi occupation. This experience of displacement and uncertainty would later influence his perspective on human behavior under conditions of uncertainty. Kahneman's educational journey began at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where he studied psychology, philosophy, and economics. It was during this time that he became fascinated with the works of psychologists such as Kurt Lewin and Leon Festinger, whose ideas on social psychology and cognitive dissonance would later shape his own research. His mentors, including the prominent psychologist Louis Gutmann, played a significant role in guiding him toward a career in psychology. One of the pivotal moments in Kahneman's educational journey was when he met Amos Tversky, a fellow student who would become his longtime collaborator and close friend. Together, they began to explore the intricacies of human judgment and decision-making, laying the groundwork for their seminal work on prospect theory. This collaboration marked the beginning of a fruitful partnership that would produce some of the most influential research in the history of psychology. Kahneman's time at the University of California, Berkeley, where he earned his doctorate in psychology, was also instrumental in shaping his theoretical contributions. His dissertation, which focused on the relationship between cognitive and emotional processes, demonstrated his early interest in understanding the complex interplay between thinking and feeling. This work would eventually lead him to challenge the dominant rational choice theory in economics, arguing that humans do not always act as rational agents, but rather rely on mental shortcuts and biases when making decisions. The 1970s saw Kahneman and Tversky's research gain momentum with the publication of their groundbreaking paper on prospect theory. This work introduced the concept of loss aversion, which suggests that people tend to fear losses more than they value gains. This idea has had far-reaching implications for fields such as economics, finance, and marketing. For instance, consider a scenario where you're offered a choice between a sure gain of $100 or a 50% chance of winning $200. While the expected value of both options is the same, research shows that most people prefer the certain gain, illustrating the power of loss aversion in shaping our decisions. Kahneman's work has not been without controversy, however. Some critics have argued that his theories oversimplify the complexities of human behavior or neglect the role of cultural and social factors in shaping decision-making. Nevertheless, his contributions have had a profound impact on our understanding of human psychology, and his collaborations with other prominent researchers, such as Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, continue to push the boundaries of knowledge in this field. As Kahneman's work gained international recognition, he began to collaborate with other prominent researchers, including Richard Thaler, a renowned economist who shared his interest in behavioral economics. Together, they explored how psychological insights could inform economic theory and policy. One notable example of their collaboration is the concept of nudges, which refers to subtle interventions that can influence people's behavior in predictable ways without limiting their freedom of choice. For instance, placing healthy food options at eye level in a cafeteria, or making retirement savings plans opt out rather than opt in, can have a significant impact on people's decisions. Kahneman's relationship with Amos Tversky, however, remains one of the most fascinating and influential collaborations in the history of psychology. Their partnership was built on a deep understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses, as well as a shared passion for challenging conventional wisdom. Tversky's tragic death in 1996 was a devastating blow to Kahneman, who has often spoken about the profound impact his friend and colleague had on his life and work. Despite their differences, Tversky was more outgoing and charismatic, while Kahneman was more introverted and analytical. They complemented each other perfectly, with Tversky's creative genius and Kahneman's rigorous thinking combining to produce some of the most innovative research in psychology. One of the key areas where Kahneman and Tversky's work has had a lasting impact is in the field of decision-making under uncertainty. Their research on prospect theory, which I mentioned earlier, highlighted the importance of framing effects, loss aversion, and the sunk cost fallacy in shaping our decisions. For example, consider a scenario where you're considering buying a stock that has been performing well, but you're hesitant because you don't want to lose the money you've already invested. This is an illustration of the sunk cost fallacy, where our decisions are influenced by past investments rather than future potential. Kahneman and Tversky's work has shown that these biases are not just minor aberrations, but rather fundamental aspects of human cognition that can have far-reaching consequences. Kahneman's work has also been influential in shaping the field of behavioral economics, which seeks to integrate insights from psychology into economic theory and policy. His collaborations with researchers like Thaler and Sunstein have led to the development of new policies and interventions aimed at promoting better decision-making and improving outcomes in areas such as health, finance, and education. For instance, the use of nudges in public policy has been shown to be effective in increasing vaccination rates, encouraging people to save for retirement, and reducing energy consumption. Despite the many accolades and recognition Kahneman has received, his work has not been without criticism. Others have criticized his reliance on laboratory experiments, arguing that these methods may not accurately capture real-world decision-making processes. However, Kahneman has always been open to criticism and has consistently sought to refine and expand his theories based on new evidence and insights. As we delve deeper into Daniel Kahneman's life and work, it's essential to explore his relationship with Amos Tversky in more depth. Their collaboration was not just a meeting of minds, but a symbiotic partnership that propelled them to challenge conventional wisdom and push the boundaries of knowledge in psychology. One notable aspect of their relationship was the way they complemented each other's strengths and weaknesses. Tversky, with his charismatic personality and creative genius, would often come up with innovative ideas, while Kahneman, with his rigorous thinking and analytical mind, would help refine and test these concepts. Their famous experiment on the Asian disease problem is a prime example of their collaborative work. In this study, they presented participants with a hypothetical scenario where a disease was expected to kill 600 people, and two alternative programs to combat it were proposed. The first program had a guaranteed saving of 200 lives, while the second program had a 1/3 chance of saving all 600 lives, but a 2/3 chance of saving no one. When the options were framed in terms of lives saved, most participants chose the first option, which guaranteed the saving of 200 lives. However, when the same options were reframed in terms of lives lost, most participants chose the second option, which had a 1/3 chance of saving all 600 lives. This experiment highlighted the power of framing effects and how people's decisions can be influenced by the way information is presented. It also demonstrated the importance of loss aversion, as people tend to fear losses more than they value gains. This concept has since been widely applied in fields such as economics, politics, and marketing. For instance, a company might frame a product as 90% fat-free rather than 10% fat to make it more appealing to consumers. Kahneman's work with Tversky also explored the concept of the anchoring effect, where people rely too heavily on the first piece of information they receive when making decisions. In one experiment, participants were asked to estimate the number of African countries in the United Nations. Before giving their answer, they were shown a random number, which was either very high or very low. The results showed that the initial random number had a significant impact on the participants' estimates, with those who saw the high number giving higher estimates and those who saw the low number giving lower estimates. This research has significant implications for real-world decision-making, as it highlights how our judgments can be influenced by irrelevant information. For example, in negotiations, an initial offer can serve as an anchor, influencing the final outcome. Understanding these biases is crucial for making more informed decisions and developing effective strategies to mitigate their impact. As Daniel Kahneman's work with Amos Tversky continued to gain recognition, they began to explore other aspects of human judgment and decision-making. One area that fascinated them was the concept of availability heuristic, which refers to the tendency for people to overestimate the importance or likelihood of information that is readily available to them. This can lead to systematic biases in decision-making, as individuals give too much weight to vivid or memorable events rather than relying on more representative data. To illustrate this concept, Kahneman and Tversky conducted an experiment where they asked participants to estimate the number of words in a given text that started with the letter K versus the number of words that had K as their third letter. Most participants thought that there were more words that started with K simply because these words were more readily available in their memory. However, the actual frequency of words that had K as their third letter was higher. This experiment demonstrated how people's judgments can be influenced by the ease with which they can recall examples rather than the actual probabilities. Kahneman's work also explored the concept of representative bias, which occurs when people judge the likelihood of an event based on how closely it resembles a typical case, rather than on the actual probabilities. For example, if someone is told that a person is a shy and introverted librarian, they might assume that this person is more likely to be a librarian than a salesperson, simply because the description seems more representative of a librarian. However, this ignores the fact that there are many more salespeople in the world than librarians, so the base rate probability of being a salesperson is actually higher. These ideas were further developed in Kahneman's seminal work, Prospect Theory, which challenged the traditional views of rational choice theory. According to prospect theory, people do not make decisions based on the expected utility of an outcome, but rather on the perceived gains and losses relative to a reference point. This means that people are more motivated by the fear of loss than the promise of gain, and that they tend to be risk-averse when it comes to gains, but risk-seeking when it comes to losses. One of the key experiments that demonstrated this concept was the Asian disease problem, which I mentioned earlier. However, another experiment that illustrates prospect theory is the insurance problem. In this study, participants were offered a choice between a sure gain of $200 or an 80% chance of gaining $250. Most people chose the sure gain, even though the expected value of the gamble was higher. However, when the same options were framed as a loss, for example, a sure loss of $200 versus an 80% chance of losing $250, most people chose to take the gamble, even though the expected value was lower. These experiments and others like them have had a profound impact on our understanding of human decision-making and have influenced fields such as economics, finance, and public policy. They have also led to the development of new approaches to decision-making, such as nudging people towards better choices by presenting information in a way that takes into account their cognitive biases. Born in Tel Aviv in 1934 to Jewish parents who had immigrated from Lithuania, Kahneman spent his early years in Palestine, which was then under British rule. His family's circumstances were modest, and they faced financial struggles, but his parents valued education and encouraged his curiosity. Kahneman's fascination with psychology began during his teenage years, when he became intrigued by the human mind and behavior. He was particularly drawn to the works of Gestalt psychologists, such as Max Wertheimer and Kurt Kafka, who emphasized the organized whole over individual components. This early interest in psychology laid the groundwork for his future academic pursuits. After completing his secondary education, Kahneman enrolled at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where he studied psychology and mathematics. It was during this period that he met his mentor, the psychologist Jerzy Kosinski, who introduced him to the concept of cognitive biases and heuristics. Kahneman's undergraduate thesis, which explored the relationship between cognitive styles and problem-solving strategies, marked the beginning of his research into human judgment and decision-making. Kahneman's graduate studies at the University of California, Berkeley, further solidified his interests in psychology. Under the guidance of his advisor, Susan Irvin Tripp, he began to explore the role of language in shaping thought and behavior. His doctoral dissertation, which examined the effects of semantic context on word recognition, demonstrated his growing expertise in experimental design and statistical analysis. One of Kahneman's most significant theoretical contributions was the concept of anchoring, which refers to the tendency for people to rely too heavily on the first piece of information they receive when making a decision. To illustrate this idea, consider an experiment in which participants were asked to estimate the number of African countries in the United Nations. Before providing their answer, some participants were shown a high anchor, for example 50, or a low anchor, for example 10. The results showed that those who saw the high anchor tended to give higher estimates, while those who saw the low anchor gave lower estimates. This phenomenon has significant implications for decision-making in fields such as finance, marketing, and public policy. Kahneman's collaboration with his longtime colleague Amos Tversky led to some of the most influential research in the history of psychology. Together, they developed the concept of loss aversion, which suggests that people tend to prefer avoiding losses over acquiring gains. This idea was demonstrated through a series of experiments, including one in which participants were offered a choice between a sure gain of $100 or a 50% chance of gaining $200. However, when the same options were framed as losses, for example, a sure loss of $100 versus a 50% chance of losing $200, most people chose to take the gamble. The relationship between Kahneman and Tversky was built on mutual respect and a deep understanding of each other's strengths and weaknesses. Tversky, who was known for his exceptional mathematical abilities, brought a rigorous analytical approach to their collaborative work. Kahneman, with his background in psychology and philosophy, provided a broader perspective on human behavior and decision-making. Together, they formed a formidable team that pushed the boundaries of psychological research and challenged conventional wisdom. Despite the significant contributions of Kahneman and Tversky's work, it was not without controversy. Some critics argued that their research was too focused on laboratory experiments and failed to account for real-world complexities. Others questioned the universality of their findings, suggesting that cultural and contextual factors might influence decision-making processes. Kahneman and Tversky acknowledged these limitations and encouraged further research to address these concerns. As Kahneman's academic career progressed, he found himself increasingly drawn to the intersection of psychology and economics. His work with Amos Tversky on prospect theory, which challenged the traditional assumptions of rational choice theory, marked a significant turning point in his research. This collaboration not only deepened his understanding of human decision-making, but also led to the development of new methodologies for studying cognitive biases and heuristics. One notable example of their work together was the Asian disease problem, an experiment designed to test how people's decisions are influenced by the way information is framed. In this study, participants were presented with a hypothetical scenario in which a disease was expected to kill 600 people. They were then given two options for responding to the outbreak: a sure save of 200 lives, or a gamble that offered a 1/3 chance of saving all 600 lives, but also carried a 2/3 chance of saving no one. When the options were framed in terms of lives saved, most participants chose the sure option. However, when the same options were reframed in terms of lives lost, most participants opted for the gamble. This striking result highlighted the power of framing effects in shaping decision-making and underscored the importance of considering how information is presented when trying to understand human choice. Kahneman's work with Tversky also led to a deeper exploration of the concept of loss aversion, which suggests that people tend to fear losses more than they value gains. Most people chose to take the gamble, even though the expected value of the two options was the same. This result demonstrated that people are more motivated by the desire to avoid losses than by the desire to acquire gains, a finding with significant implications for fields such as finance and marketing. Throughout his career, Kahneman has been recognized for his contributions to psychology and economics, including the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences in 2002. His work has also had a profound impact on our understanding of human behavior and decision-making, influencing fields from public policy to business management. Despite these accolades, Kahneman remains committed to advancing our understanding of the human mind, continuing to conduct research and write about topics related to cognitive biases, decision-making, and behavioral economics. In recent years, Kahneman has turned his attention to the topic of well-being, exploring how people's perceptions of their own happiness and satisfaction with life are influenced by factors such as memory, attention, and social comparison. This work has led to a number of important insights, including the idea that people tend to overestimate the importance of material possessions and external events in determining their overall well-being. Instead, Kahneman argues that well-being is more closely tied to internal factors such as mood, attention, and social relationships, a finding with significant implications for how we approach issues related to happiness and life satisfaction. Daniel Kahneman's profound impact on our understanding of human behavior and decision-making has left an indelible mark on the field of psychology, challenging conventional wisdom and paving the way for a deeper exploration of the complexities of the human mind. With his groundbreaking research and enduring influence, he has empowered us to navigate the biases and heuristics that shape our choices, inviting us to cultivate a more nuanced understanding of ourselves and the world around us. That's all for today's Psych with Sigmund. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, may your ego find balance between pleasure and reality.